Midoriya smiled wishfully at the most important thing he had left in his possession, a photo of him and his boyfriends. He missed them with something fierce. 4 weeks and 2 days were more than enough for him to ache for something, for the other parts of his heart, and he was determined to get them back, come hell or high waters. Midoriya could barely make out the photo through his tears, but he wiped them away and picked up the photo. He was going out and seeing them no matter what the League of Villains said or did to him. They could turn the world against him, wire his brain against everything it's ever known, but they could not stop him from loving them. "I'll be there shortly. Don't you guys worry." After placing it in a hidden part of his jacket, Midoriya climbed into bed with a smirk on his face. After nearly 2 weeks of preparations, he would finally be able to see his loved ones' faces. He wondered if they would be just as ecstatic. He drifted off into slumber. Midoriya sat on his bed, all of his carefully laid out tactics and ideas spread against gray sheets. Once he was sure that the villains had let their guard down, he asked simply for a book and pen in order to keep his thoughts in place. What they didn't know was as soon as he could, he listed each of their quirks, their weaknesses and strengths, and whatever else he could think that might help. They chose the wrong person to kidnap. Midoriya needed a plan. He couldn't just waltz out in public without any covering. Who knows what could happen with him now being listed as a missing person and to the heroes, a potential villain. He sat there brainstorming until he came up with the brilliant idea of sneaking around the mall. He knew Class 1A spent hours in the mall together, and Midoriya often liked to drag his boyfriends there to see the latest All Might Gear releases. Yeah, that could work. Midoriya jumped off the bed, walking over to his closet and opening the doors. He quickly grabbed an oversized hoodie and a pair of sweats. Once dressed, he threw on his iconic red sneakers. He knew he was taking a big risk wearing them, but he couldn't part with them. They reminded him of home. Now the hard part. He made his way over to the open bar, where Shigaraki and Kuroko were organizing an attack on UA. They stopped and regarded him suspiciously when they saw his attire. "And where do you think you're going?" Shiragagi questioned as Midoriya walked to the door. He quickly schooled his face into a mask of indifference. "Going to wander the mall for a while. The kids from school often hung out there, and I need to get a reading on how they're handling the sudden loss of one of their own." Both of the villains eyed him for a couple seconds before Kuroko smiled and dismissed him. Midoriya was gone before he could even finish waving him off. Midoriya made sure to keep his hood low. That way no one could see his face, his glowing green eyes being the only visible thing amongst the black shadow casted from his hoodie. It was a quick chain ride and a walk to the mall, something he'd done hundreds of times, but usually with the feisty blonde grumbling under his breath and a two-toned redhead on either side of him. Entering through the food court with his boyfriends on his mind, Midoriya roamed the mall. He felt like he could finally breathe since this whole fiasco started. No villains to be on guard against, no conflicting thoughts circling his brain, and no reason to put a mask up. On this Saturday, he was just a face in the crowd, the gentle buzz of the townfolk around him making him feel fuzzy and warm. He thought about how easy it would be for him to run away right now. He could run to the police or UA, but he didn't. Why? He didn't really know. Maybe he just didn't want anything to do with the hero world anymore. What did they do to help him when he was strapped to a table sobbing for help? Nothing. They did absolutely nothing. Or, a little voice whispered in the back of his mind, maybe you're scared that they won't accept a tarnished version of the boy they used to know. He froze when that thought popped up, gaining dirty looks around him for stopping in the middle of the crowd. What would they do when this was all over? How would his friends act? But most importantly, would Shoto and Kachan still want him? He tried to calm his racing heart. He didn't want to panic at all, considering all it would do is hinder him there. There would be a time to worry about this in the future, but right now all he could do was focus on the present. With that thought, he continued his lap around the mall. After walking into his fourth store, a couple came in after him. He didn't pay them any mind and quickly dismissed them, but he froze when he heard a familiar voice. "I can't believe I let you take us or talk us into going into this shitty dump. What's the point of coming to this mall anyways? It's not like there's any fucking changes. He could hear the pout in Kachan's voice, and he felt tears start to gather, but they didn't fall until he heard the reply. Being cooped up in our rooms or holed up at the gym isn't actually healthy considered, despite what you might have read in your All My Daily subscriptions. Shoto sat back in a mocking tone. Jesus Christ. Midoriya knew his face was red due to the effort of him trying not to let any sound escape of trembling lips. But God, his boyfriends were right there. He spent all this time dreaming of seeing their faces again, and they were behind him, arguing as usual. He didn't need to turn around to see Shoto's fingers laced with Kachan's. While Kachan would grumble and curse, he never once dropped either of their hands whenever they reached out for his. While he pretended he was above Bnha, out of the three of them he thrived for the most out of casual touches. He wanted to jump into their arms and let them take away all of his worries, let Kachan curse and shout all he wanted in between hot kisses, and let even hotter hands skim his body for injuries. He wanted Shoto to hug him from behind, sandwiching him in between the loves of his life while murmuring in his ear about how much they missed and loved him, and how they were so worried, while cool arms would be wrapped around his waist. And in a perfect story, he would. But this is not a fairy tale. So as nonchalantly as he could, he grabbed 2 items off the nearest clothing rack and made his way to the cash register. As much as he wanted to be with his boyfriends, he felt himself shying away. He didn't know what they thought of him after what happened at the park, but he couldn't face them while that was so raw and open in everyone's mind. Just seeing them was enough, or at least that's what he told himself. Once he paid, he made his way to the bathroom to quickly change and discard what had already been on. He took a look at what he managed to grab off the clothing rack. All he knew that it was in the medium section of the clothing dividers, and he had prayed to God that it would be enough. And he nearly fell over with what he saw. He had accidentally grabbed a mini skirt with tiny prints of All Might's name all over it, and a jacket with All Might's name across the back and his signature. Gosh darn it. He'll just have to grit his teeth and cope with it. He quickly changed and discarded the old clothes in the nearest bin before throwing his hood on and walking calmly to the entrance. But the universe wasn't on his side today, because as he was walking out of the entrance of the mall, he heard a harshly voice yell out, "Hey, fucker in the All Might hoodie, we have some questions for you." Midoriya didn't even dignify Kachan with the response. He just ran. He tried to think back on what he might have done to catch their attention, but he quickly threw it out of his mind to think about later when he wasn't running for his life. He ran through the crowd, trying to keep his hood from falling, and dodging different civilians. He sent a silent thanks to whoever was listening that stealth was a part of training at UA, and he passed it with flying colors. He jumped on the first train sitting in the station and breathed a sigh of relief when he realized he couldn't hear shouts, nor could he see spiky blonde or messy bi-colored hair. He started to slowly relax when the train was rolling off the tracks until he saw a tanned hand, a very familiar tanned hand, prying the doors open while Todoroki walked through the opening Katsuki was providing and approached him. He knew he was trapped. He couldn't run, nor could he fight because he'll risk giving up who he really was, so he sat there quietly and hoped that it would pass quickly and painlessly. "It seems we have a problem, sir. You see, our boyfriend of 2 years has been missing for the past month, and the last time we saw him he was causing destruction at the local park. And I'm sure you know where he is because only Izuku has a scar tracing his inner thigh to his ankle, and only Izuku has BK or NTS initialed on the back of his shoes. So mind telling us what the fuck is going on, Midoriya?" Midoriya tensed. Of course. How could he have forgotten about the names being on the back of his shoes? They had bought him brand new red sneakers with their names initialed on it for their 2nd anniversary. Even worse, the scar. He should have known that would call their attention, and of course they would know it so well. He got it on his first mission with them. They held his hand when he almost bled out and kissed the scar that added to the perfect imperfection known as Midoriya Izuku. When he didn't dignify them with an answer and stubbornly kept his head low, he heard a growl and felt a hand close around his waist to yank him out of his seat, and another lift him out of his chair by his waist and slam him against the train wall, automatically leading him to wrap his legs around their waists and arch his back to lessen the impact. Oh, this was bad. He had hidden himself near the back of the train to blend in with the crowd, since he knew people wouldn't look twice at him. But now the plan was backfiring. badly, because no one was paying attention to the three. And even if they did get curious, all they would see was the two boys' broad and tallish frames pressed shoulder to shoulder, and not for the first time Midoriya cursed his short stature, as he was surely well hidden and truly hidden from sight. He asked you a dumbass question, Deku. Why are you waltzing around the mall and park like your ass isn't considered missing? Like the heroes won't arrest your ass on sight. And here Kachan leant in close until they were nearly nose to nose. Why haven't you contacted us, huh? We've been worried sick about you, especially after that stupid letter you sent. And the first time we see you again, you're getting some blonde bitch and blowing up parks now? Midoriya didn't know what to do. He knew he could fight the hold that Katsuki had on him, but then he'll still have to survive and get through them both, and he wasn't ready for that just yet. He was outnumbered, and he couldn't risk injuring himself. He had bigger battles to face. Midoriya took a deep breath before he set his jaw and looked into the faces of the two men he loved the most. You guys, you both have the right to be pissed at me. I've done some pretty messed up things that hurt you both, but I need you to both trust me that I know what I'm doing, he pleaded. How can we trust that you're not lying to us, or how that you're even the same boy we fell for? Why should we trust you? Todoroki questioned him. I can't tell you what's going on, but all I can tell you is that I love you. I have always loved you both, and I wish I didn't have to do this, but I have no choice. Forgive me once this is all over, once I have ended this. With that, he did what he wanted to do since he saw them in the mall. He kissed Katsuki hard and broke one wrist free to grab Todoroki's face closer as well, so he could kiss him senseless too. He knew they were pissed, and they had every right to be, but he couldn't risk them. They were too precious to him, and he'll make it up to them once he had the chance. Once he got his fill of them both, he looked them in the face and told them this. Get stronger. Not for me, but for each other. If I can't get out of this, you'll both need to lean on each other, because the next time I'll see you, it'll be on the battlefield, and I will not go easy on either of you, Midoriya said seriously, but the hands caressing their faces spoke of something entirely different than his words implied. With one last peck, he uncrossed his leg and quickly grabbed Katsuki's head and bashed it against Todoroki's before using 8% to roundhouse kick both of them before they could get their wits together enough to fight back. He quickly pressed the earpiece that the league gave him to automatically have a portal opened back to the base from wherever he was. It was for emergencies only, since Kuragago portal could only last 4 minutes if he was not there to sustain them. He calmly let the darkness engulf him, and the last thing he saw was Todoroki cradling Kachan's limp body to his chest protectively.